Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. It is Tuesday, March 19th, 2019. Hope your week is going well, especially for folks in the upper Midwest where the flooding from the snow being melted by warmer temperatures and the rainfall that we've had, that big blizzard we had last week, that massive storm system, did bring warmer temps and some rainfall up there, and it's broken up some of the ice. The rivers have swollen. You got the ice flowing through there. It's just been a big mess. And if you've been following that on weather Twitter, as a lot of people call it, then you know a lot about that. And so at least today, yesterday, today, and even some tomorrow, a fairly quiet period in the lower 48. No big issues. And some of that water can hopefully start to go down. But it is on the move. That whole overland surge of water up there is definitely moving down those basins, and that's going to be a problem as we move through the rest of spring here. It's meteorological spring now. I guess the calendar spring, the equinox coming up here on the 20th, I guess it is. All right, so we're going to talk about lower 48 weather more in just a little bit. First, let's take a look at the SOI, a good indicator of where we are with the pressure pattern of the tropical Pacific, especially along the equator. And as you can see here, the last 30 days, pretty negative, minus 12. Even the last 90 days, we'll just statistically call it minus 6, rounded up, negative 6. And then the daily contributor from today's reading, minus 1 or so, almost 1.5. Looking at it graphically, there has been a little bit of a recovery as of late in the Southern Oscillation Index. That's the 30-day. This one is the 90-day, much more steady overall decline. And what does all of this mean? Well, what it does is it shows that there is lower pressure overall in the Eastern Pacific, and this is just an oversimplification of everything. That's a terrible L. Let's try again. Lower pressure in the Eastern Pacific than there is in the Western Pacific. So the net flow of air has been generally from west to east, or a slowing of the easterly trades is another way to look at it. And so that allows this warm pool that's usually prevalent in the Western Pacific to, when you get these westerly winds, to create these what are called oceanic Kelvin waves, and that generates these large islands of subsurface well above normal pools of water, if you will, or not globs, but it looks like a glob on this slice of the subsurface anomalies. So yeah, when that SOI is low, it triggers this El Nino look and reality to the overall pattern. And we can see that even more so when we look at the surface map. So generally speaking, and the SOI is a measurement of the pressure out here in the Southwest Pacific between Tahiti and Darwin, of course, in Australia. And then there's your look to it, the overall warmth of the surface in the equatorial region of the Pacific, this weak El Nino. So that's the surface. If we go back and look at the subsurface, there's a couple of interesting things about this. Yeah, that's very, very warm compared to the long-term average. Plus 6 right here in the center of it at about 100 meters of depth. But what's happening over here? All right? That's where I'm interested, because this is the future over here. This is what's coming up in the near term. This is several weeks down the road, because everything's moving in this conveyor belt type fashion from the Western Pacific through the East Pac, the water surfaces and what trades there are, spreads it out like warm butter along a big piece of toast. All right, there's my food reference for the day. When you see the SOI start to recover, I want to know, does this keep on? Generally speaking, do we start to turn around the 90-day? Because if so, then maybe there will be no more downwelling and creation of another one of these. Or it'll reinforce itself and we'll go into a full-blown moderate to maybe major El Nino for the year. And I read the latest discussion from the Climate Prediction Center, and they were indicating that the models, these climate models, literally have a spread from a moderate La Nina, which is a abnormal cooling of the Pacific, to another heck of an El Nino event and everything in between. So there's, this part of the year is called the spring predictability barrier, and that is why. Because you have a large range of possibilities, and the models just can't deal with this transition period that we know as March, April, and into May. So right now, though, what we have before us, very warm for sure in the subsurface, pretty warm at the surface itself, about 1 degree Celsius overall, but then a big question mark as to what happens in the far western Pacific, not only at the surface with what's happening with the pressure pattern, but at the subsurface with what goes on in the creation or not of additional downwelling Kelvin waves that produces these warm pools in the subsurface that later become part of the El Nino. We'll just have to wait and see. The good thing is we have tools to monitor this, and that's part of what I like to do in these discussions. All right, so that's how you tie it all together. So zooming in from this map to this map, look at the Western Hemisphere, this curious little area of cold, relative to average cold anomalies here off the coast of Costa Rica and Panama, parts of Ecuador. There's the Galapagos Islands. But then out across the equator, that anomalous warmth certainly spreading out there. But around Hawaii, colder than normal overall. Off the coast of California, colder than normal off the Baja, right around to just slightly colder. So this is not a giant, widespread, big-time El Nino yet. And I do not know what's going to happen. Nobody knows for sure. As I said in that discussion that I read from CPC, a big range of options is out there, and the scientists, the oceanographers, the meteorologists, they know it. They know it. That's the predictability barrier that this time of year brings. Looking at the Gulf of Mexico for all you spring breakers, pretty much from, we'll call it Tampa, St. Pete, point south from there, Sarasota, all the way around, even down to South Padre. Shelf water and nearshore beach water, still too cold, at least for my taste. And listen, don't be fooled by that. It's true that the water temperatures make a difference. Your land temperatures could be 80, 85 degrees. But if the water is still 65 or even 70, and you have onshore flow, look out. My daughter got a painful lesson in that. She went out the last time it got into the 80s here several days ago. We had a nice warm spell. Off to the beach she went. Water temperatures at Wrightsville Beach were still in the upper 50s, lower 60s, something like that. I think it was like 57 or something. And we had an easterly wind set up, probably from the sea breeze because it was so warm along the coast and inland areas. That air rises, pulls the air in off the beach. And she got an air conditioning courtesy of Mother Nature. Let's just say that. It happens, all right? So just be mindful of that, as well as other potential beach hazards if you're out there. Be careful. That's the dad and me talking. All right, off the coast of the mid-Atlantic parts of the southeast, you can really see the Gulf Stream right in here, very nicely. Cold up here off of New England and the mid-Atlantic, warmer along the Carolina coast, the shelf water especially. But it just amazes me, always will, that just offshore of Cape Hatteras, Rodanthe, Ocracoke, it's like almost 80 degrees in the Gulf Stream. Absolutely remarkable. One day, I can afford a boat, and I'll go out there and see what that looks like. Literally boat my way from Ocracoke to the Gulf Stream, and I hear that you can actually see the differences on the surface of the water. That would be amazing to see. And if it's a calm enough day, and the wind isn't just screaming, maybe I could take the quadcopter, you call it a drone, I call it a quadcopter, and fly it above and take a look from above. That would be really cool. All right, so let me just show you something here. Ben Knoll, I talk about him often because he does a good job of interpretation of things that are otherwise very complicated, in my opinion. And, okay, so he's a meteorologist, right? And I am a geographer. I am a hurricane specialist or expert, especially on their impacts. But this guy is the meteorologist, all right? He's got the mathematics and the physics behind, and certainly some mapping skills. And I like to rely on other people to help shape what I learn. I talk about this a lot. Him, Eric Webb, Dr. Ventris up at WSI, or whatever they're called now, forget. Joe Bastardi, I learned a lot from him over the years, and there are others that are coming up. Some people 20 years younger than me that know a lot more than me, especially about the math and the physics and these other drivers that are coming along in the world of weather and climate and so forth. And Ben is one of those. And he tweeted me the other day, mentioned me in his tweet, that the latest UKMET seasonal guidance, arguably the most accurate ahead of last hurricane season, signals the potential for near coastal tropical action during June through August of 2019. And let's just go back and look at this anomaly map real quick. Near coastal action, all through here. That's where the warmest anomalies are as of the 18th of March. Main development region, generally speaking, right at or colder than the long-term average. So keep that in mind as we go through this animation here. Okay, let's just let this start over. There's June. All right, so this nice little GIF animation. Greens, the darker greens, are positive precipitation anomalies, and these browns down here are negatives. Okay, these are lower than average rainfall, higher than average rainfall in the green. So in June, maybe something in the Bay of Campeche, climatologically, that makes sense. Interesting that it's, dry relative to average in the area that we normally see development in June in the eastern Pacific. That's curious. I don't know why it shows that. Who knows? Maybe something coming up out of the Caribbean also climatologically makes sense. And then maybe frontal stalls or subtropical development in the southwest Atlantic, hard to say. But the model and how it works, which I do not know much about, we'll have Ben on one day to talk about it. I'm going to work on that coming up. I'll talk about that later as well. And he can explain it better. But it's picking up these signals in the overall June pattern. And there you go. This is its output. And so you see that the deep tropics, generally speaking, you'd expect that for June anyway, drier than normal. Now, what about July? July is much drier. It's typically the deadest month of the hurricane season. Deep tropics, Caribbean especially, drier. But this is really curious. Not much activity at all near the Mexican coastline. North of there, yeah, so maybe these hurricanes forming and heading west instead of turning and heading into the Mexican coastline. Wouldn't that be amazing if the model is able to sense that in the overall pattern of how it's doing whatever it's doing here? Quite amazing. And this short-term stuff here, so to speak, this is June, July, August. And when we get closer, these models refine this even better in the ensemble prediction system. I just think this is where we're headed with the science. Far better than trying to figure out a hurricane season 6 months, 4 months ahead of time. A general idea, Atlantic's warmer, Pacific's colder, El Nino, no El Nino, whatever, I get it. It's kind of like looking at a football team and saying everybody's healthy, they have a winning record, they're 9-1 on the season, so they should beat the opponent who is 4-5 on the season. That's your general setup. But nobody could have predicted that the quarterback for the team that was supposed to win breaks his femur in the first quarter, and the other team railroads him and they win by 2 touchdowns. Yeah, you get what I'm saying? These seasonal forecasts are tough. I get it. I really like this sub-seasonal stuff. And what Ben is picking out here could be very helpful. There's my rant. All right, so that's July. Here's August. Cue August. Very dry in the deep tropics coming off Africa. Little anomaly here in the Windward Islands area. We'll have to see what happens with that. Not sure why we have anomalies up here in the precipitation side, but not much down here, unless something is, forming close and then getting stuck up here. I don't know. Just an interesting look. And still, in August, dry relative to average, anomalously so, right, along the area off of Mexico. So maybe that's good for them. Of course it's good for them, but maybe this is a good sign. But really interesting tweet from Ben. I appreciate him tagging me on Twitter to take a look at that. Now, in lower 48 weather news, take a look at this. This is a really big deal here. Massive, let's get a different color, maybe blue. massive flooding all throughout the Mississippi River Basin and its contributing streams and other major river systems. Not so much streams as major river systems. The Missouri and others. Look at all those gauges. 64 of them in moderate, which is red. 33 gauges in major flooding, that's the purple. And a lot of this is going to make its way south down the Mississippi towards New Orleans and points around there. So, yeah, we just zoom in a little bit here. By the way, you can get to this on the weather.gov website. Just click on streams, lakes, and rivers or something like that, and it gives you this information. This is going to continue, okay? We're just getting into the springtime, and with that warmer than normal Gulf. We'll go back and look at that real quick. The Gulf of Mexico above average sea surface temperature wise. Get these fronts coming through and drawing moisture. Yep, it could be a wet spring. That's something to definitely keep an eye on, and I will be discussing this frequently on these weekly updates. All right, so looking at the GFS here, let's back it up if we can. At least today is generally quiet. All right, so this is today. We'll move through the next few days. A little bit of a nor'easter tries to develop there at about hour 60 to 72. See that? Off the coast right here in the northeast corridor. It's been quiet all year, and now we try to pop one. Okay. At least it's not a big deal overall. Hopefully it won't be. Maybe some snow on the backside and the north side, especially up in Canada. Something to watch out for. Gulf of Maine, New Hampshire, maybe southeast New England, but it's getting a little late for those nor'easters in terms of major impacts. Such a strange year that we didn't see much of that. A little bit of nuisance rain, maybe a day 5 or so in parts of the Midwest out here. But probably any rain coming along these basins is just going to be very unwelcome. Now look what happens here. This is the 25th. Look at this huge chunk of Canadian air. One more Arctic outbreak coming down. 1040 millibars in Montana there. Cold again. And watch this storm system drop south. This is 156 hours out, the 26th. We started the winter season with a snowstorm in the Carolinas. You remember that? I covered it. I went out there. I was up in Hickory, Statesville, Marion. Had a pretty good snow there. What was around December 7th, 8th, 9th, something like that. So at the end of March, maybe we end the winter season with some kind of snow. I tell you. So this is the GFS. Yeah, there you go. You guys watch out. That's 174 hours out. Who knows? We shall see. It's like trying to predict a hurricane with the models that far out. You just have to, maybe just, okay, something I'll keep an eye on. And then that scoots on out, and we end the month. More storminess out west. Rain in the areas we don't need it. Just something to watch. It's going to be an active pattern as we end the month of March. Look at that. And then maybe it'll go out like a lamb. Right in like a lion, out like a lamb. We'll see. There's April 4th. Hey, April 4th, I'll be down here at the National Tropical Weather Conference in South Padre Island. So it's going to be time for me to watch what the weather's going to be doing as we get closer to that, because I've got to fly. And speaking of flying can affect let's start over, Mark. Flying doesn't affect anything, contrary to what the chemtrail people say. Now I'm going to have a bunch of comments in the YouTube. Severe weather, though, affects flying. That's what I wanted to say. How is severe weather the next several days? That's what I was trying to show you. Not much. The greens are just, general thunderstorms, no big deal. This is day 3's outlook. Day 4 through, that was day, what is it? This is day 3. This is day 4 through 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. Probability, predictability, whatever, too low. Bottom line, not much in the way of severe weather, which is great news because we do have the massive flooding, come on, trying to get me back, going on in the upper Midwest, and we could just do without the severe weather for now. Covered a lot today. So the biggest thing to take away from this, big question marks regarding the El Nino. Does it strengthen and become a major factor this year or not? And I'm very, very serious when I say I don't have the answer to that. If I did, I would tell you. and nobody has the answer. Those model ranges and the climate models, very, very substantial, so keep that in mind. One other thing to keep in mind, you're going to hear more people talking on weather Twitter and elsewhere about El Nino and how it usually dampens the hurricane season in the Atlantic, and that equals good news. And while in a very general sense that is true, like we don't want to hype things up and there is a danger of making storms and rumors of storms. You know, you see model storms, hurricanes, blizzards, severe weather outbreaks in the models, and people start to hype those up in a negative way, too much hype, and when something of doom is coming along, right? I think the same can be said if you overhype good news. And I know you're like, well, what do you mean? So hear me out. People hear what they want to hear. It's called confirmation bias. So if you say, and people see somebody they trust on Twitter or elsewhere, that El Nino equals good news because no hurricanes, and then people dismiss that as being, okay, good, no hurricane season, I don't have to worry about it. You start reinforcing the notion in those people that their confirmation bias, that they don't want there to be a hurricane, they tend to ignore it more. Does that make sense? So we just got to be careful that we have middle ground in understanding, even with an El Nino present, you could still have a major impact season, just possibly not as many intense storms and maybe not as many between Africa and the Lesser Antilles. Just a long way of saying, be careful what you hear, trust and verify. Does that make sense? Some of the very smart people that you follow, even me, go and verify what I'm saying, for God's sakes, come on. You have to, because you can't just take what you're told and assume that it's 100% accurate. Do your own research. That is why I like to incorporate other people's expertise, like I talked about with Ben Knoll. It helps round out the conversation and make it easier to deal with everything, all these subjects. All right? Well, that is it from me for today. I appreciate you tuning in as always. I'll be back early next week. And then, you know what, after that, it's time for the National Tropical Weather Conference. And I am very excited about being there. Down in South Padre Island, Texas. It's coming up. I am Mark Sudduth. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks for watching on your side of the screen. I'll be back with you early next week with more.